Welcome to another edition of Grace Under Pressure, where my guest today is Dr. Ruth Gotian. I will tell you all about her in just one moment. Grace Under Pressure is a LinkedIn Live show that poses questions to thought leaders and doers like Ruth, who are changing our world for the better. Grace Under Pressure focuses on what's too often dismissed as the soft stuff, the caring, the compassion, and the commitment we exert toward others. And when you do it as a leader, as Ruth is, it means bringing people together for common cause, for the betterment of all of us. So welcome, Dr. Ruth Gotian. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here with you and with everybody.
Great. It's exciting. And let me tell folks all about you. You are brand new to the new Thinkers 50 radar, which, folks, is really, really cool. And I'm insanely jealous because I'm not on that radar, but maybe one day. Please. Anyway, Ruth, she is the CLO and Assistant Professor of Education and Anesthesiology, and a former dean of mentoring, which we're going to talk about, at the Weill Cornell Medical School. She's been hailed by the journal Nature, as well as Columbia, as an expert in mentoring and leadership development, and writes for Forbes, as do I. She has a weekly show and podcast, and she gathers super achievers, and she is quite special. She's the author of some books, which I tripped over here, excuse me, and she's got a brand new one coming out soon. So welcome, Ruth. It's a pleasure to have you on the show today.
Thank you. I'm so excited.
I love your enthusiasm. So you work, help people learn, and you're part of the Weill Cornell Medical School. So how are you experiencing it? Before we went on the air, you told me you've actually been in your office since last May. So
healthcare never closed, right? These were the people who are at the front of the front lines. So they've been here. So the rest of us are really here to support them. And just because there's a pandemic going on, finally we're past the surge and the vaccines are rolling out, we can really start ramping up our learning and our leading and our professional development. So we are doing that full steam ahead. We've had to change a little bit how we do it. It's all virtual now, but we realize that at the core, right? My background is in adult learning and leadership. And at the core of that is the understanding that as adults, we don't learn like children. We don't sit there in a classroom and have someone stand in the front of the room and profess to us for 8 hours. And then we have to figure out how to organize that information in our head. Adults learn differently because we have so many other things on our mind. Some learn better by reading, some by listening, some by watching podcasts, some want to read more in depth, some want to read something shorter, like an article or a blog post. So what we're doing is really creating this knowledge transfer in different ways. So it's choose your own adventure, choose which really works for you. And we have so many things that we're offering. It's fun.
I love how you frame this as learning as an adventure. And we will say that to children, but why shouldn't it apply to us adults? Now, connectedness is a theme that is echoing through our pandemic. How have you been able to foster connectedness in learning in a virtual environment?
So I think one of the things to realize, and this goes back to the core idea that not everybody learns the same way. And just because it's virtual doesn't mean that there's no connectedness. So if I'm giving talks, if I'm giving presentations, I'm obviously using the chat function significantly more. And I encourage people, and I think it's actually a blessing for those quieter learners to actually be able to communicate via the chat, because not everyone is able to formulate their thoughts on command and ask their questions exactly during the Q&A time. They have ideas that take a little time to brew, and they're extremely well thought out. So that has really been a gift to those quieter learners. Other people will say, I can't wait till the Q&A section because I have my question right now, or I have my comment. By the time we get to Q&A in half an hour, I'll forget it. Just put it in the chat, right? So that's one of the ways, and people are able to start communicating with each other. The other thing to realize is that not everybody learns in large groups. Some people want those large group events. Some people want small group events. Some people want those one-on-one events. So we're able to really provide that variety of all different types of mediums for people to stay connected and still learn. Because one of the common threads with extreme high achievers is that they're constantly learning. Even after they have their degrees and even after they have all of their accolades, they will learn from anyone at any time. It could be someone older to them, at their level, junior to them. But the key is that they are open to it.
Great.
So that's the key.
I'm glad you mentioned the chat, because I did some research and did an article on the e-learning at the beginning of our pandemic. And one of our colleagues, Tasha Urich, spoke about how much she enjoyed virtual presentation because of the chat function. You can become more connected with others. Now, you touched on your topic, which is near and dear to you, and a topic of a forthcoming book, extreme achievement. What is that?
So the book is called The Success Factor. It's coming out next January, and I research extreme high achievers, and that actually started years ago with my doctoral dissertation, where I looked at the most successful physician scientists of our generation, people who have the MD and also do research, people like Dr. Tony Fauci. So it started with them and Nobel laureates and NIH Institute directors, and over the years it has grown. So now I interview CEOs of Fortune 500 companies and astronauts and Olympic champions and NBA champions and some public figures. How did they get to be so successful? And that's what I really look to uncover, because I don't believe anyone wakes up in the morning saying, I think I want to be average. My goal is to be average. I don't think anyone says that. I think we all want to be successful, but not everyone knows how to do it. We don't always have the tools. We get a lot of information about habits. Read 5 hours a day, wake up at 4 a.m. Not everyone can do that,
me.
right? Not everyone can do that. People have to go to work, people, whatever it is. Yeah. And just because it's their habit doesn't mean it's something you can do. But there are mindsets and skill sets that you can build in order to develop your leadership. And the NBA stars will all tell me every day they want to practice and be better, 1% better than they were the day before.
That sounds a little bit like musicians.
That's right.
Pianists. So I am a very amateur piano player, and I do remember as a child through the endless lessons that I did not enjoy, nor the practicing, but I'm glad I did it because it's paid off now. But the endless hours that virtuoso pianists would play, and same thing with violin, any virtuoso performer, but endless the scales and things like that, and practice, and so that's getting better every day. So what is a mindset that would send one toward high achievement?
So there's actually 4 of them, and you touched on one of them. So you touched on 2 of them, but we'll start with the first one. The first one is you have to find your intrinsic motivation. Intrinsic motivation, as opposed to extrinsic motivation. Intrinsic motivation is what you would do for free if you could. This is why you whistle on the way to work. This is what excites you. This is what lights your fire. This is what you were put on this earth to do. Now you're good at it, but you will put in the effort to get even better at it and excel. Now, This is different from extrinsic motivation, which is what you do for the diploma, the promotion, those accolades. If you're doing it for the accolades, for the diploma, for the bonus, whatever it is, you will either fail out or burn out. That's what will happen.
Let me ask you that, because you are in a medical community. One must have an MD before one does surgery. So,
right.
Is there a danger in that? So, in other words, you have to love what you do before you go for that MD. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. And when people start to question their ideas, and I used to run an MD PhD program, and they would question, is this really for me? I would pull out their application from when they applied to medical school. And I tell people, go back to your why. Why are you doing this? Because the second you can remember your why, that'll reignite you to start doing it. So you want to get that passion. You want to be able to do that and find what it is that you love. So that's the first one.
Right.
The second one is that work ethic. It is that drive, as you were talking about. So if you look at the way people are constantly working to get better, everyone can be good, but it takes that extra effort to be great.
Yes.
And if you do that compounded over time, that gap between you and everyone else will just get bigger and bigger and bigger. So it's really not surprising why high achievers are 400% more productive than the average person, because they keep working at it. They will also look at feedback as an opportunity for enhancement. So you were talking about musicians, right?
Yep.
Musicians will look at anyone and talk to anyone and look at the videos and go over it in their mind. How can I get better? How can I sound more fluid? How can I just be part of the entire orchestra? Same thing with athletes. They're constantly looking for ways that they can get better, faster, stronger, because the slightest adjustment could mean the difference between gold and fourth place.
Or in my case, par and quadruple bogey. But as much as I analyze my golf swing, it's hopeless.
Right. But it takes that practice, and it takes that constant effort, and recognizing that the feedback you get is not a criticism. It's an opportunity for enhancement. So that's number 2, is the work ethic. The third one is that strong foundation that you also touched on as well. All of the extreme high achievers have a very strong foundation, and they're constantly reinforcing it. So they're not saying, I am a world-class pianist, I no longer need to practice my skills. They'll practice their skills. Mm-hmm. The athletes, the Olympic athletes, the NBA stars, the same drills that they're doing in their gyms are the same ones you would see in a junior high gym. Same thing. Because that is part of the foundation. Constantly reinforcing it. There was a fun story of the guy who won the Nobel Prize a couple of years ago. He got the call early in the morning, and then there was a picture of him a few hours later submitting grants. He still has to submit his grants, right? That doesn't stop, and it must have been the deadline. So, and then the final one, the fourth one, is what we touched on at the very beginning, which is their ability to constantly learn. Even after they get their degrees, they're always looking to learn more. And it's not just about reading. Some will read books, some will read articles, some will listen to podcasts, some will watch webcasts such as this, some will talk to people. They learn by talking to people. It's that different way of just being that sponge and constantly learning. And they all are learning from mentors. So it's important to recognize they all have mentors, and not just one. They have a group of them, and they all pay it forward by mentoring others.
We're going to jump into mentoring, because I know that's your sweet spot and something passionate to me. But when we talk about, I want to close this out on high achievement. And you mentioned the B word, burnout. How does one who's a high achiever avoid burnout?
So I think you have to be very, very focused on what is your goal and how are you going to work towards advancing to your goal. Mm-hmm. And how many hours are you going to spend on that? Mm-hmm. And what are you going to do to protect the time that is not carved out for that? Mm-hmm. And that's, I think, where people sort of forget that, right? So there's little things you can do that will really help with those types of things. Shut off the notifications on your phone is one of the biggest ones. It has been completely liberating for me, right? I don't need to know every time somebody comments on LinkedIn or Twitter or anything. It can wait till the end of the day till I check that. But then there's a time I shut it off, right? I don't need to be a slave to it. And I think that's important.
That's right. Oh, let me ask something else, because it gets into the artistic sense, less the athletic, but perhaps, and that's the other directedness. And let me give you a quick roundabout. The great entertainers, and one of my favorites is, of course, Jerry Seinfeld. And Seinfeld talks about when you come up in your career, you talk about how you killed, meaning the audience laughed. When you're in your thing, in your groove, and you're successful, what you think about is the audience. And I know great performers do that. Does other directedness help us avoid burnout?
to think about, well, I think it's more
Not about
thinking
me,
about,
it's about my audience. It's about creating an experience for them. I'm just tossing that out.
so I'll tell you something that two people who I really respect told me. One is my mentor, Dr. Bert Shapiro, and the other is Dr. Tony Fauci. They both said to me, do something important, not just interesting. Do something important, not just interesting. So if what you're doing can benefit other people, it's worth doing.
That absolutely.
It's worth doing, and that will keep you going. And trust me, there's a lot of dark times, and whatever it is that you choose to do, not everything is a bed of roses. There's always these challenges that you have to go through. And one of the things with the high achievers, they face challenges just like everyone else, but they know that it's not a question of if they will overcome the challenge, because they know that they will. So instead, they focus their energy on how to overcome the challenge, because what they're working on is important. It's important. They need to figure this out. So once you're able to overcome that challenge because of that change in mindset, change in focus, that really helps.
Okay. Now, an escape valve in there, and you said, or not, since escape valve is not what I meant. I misspoke.
A step.
But a support system and your sweet spot, mentoring. Tell us about mentoring. It's a word that's maybe a buzzword, which is fine, but how do you define mentoring?
A mentoring relationship is long-term. It's somebody that has your best interests at heart and is there to help you and your career. And actually, Dr. Kathy Cram out of Boston actually said a mentor does two things. They help you with your career, but they also help you with the psychosocial part of it, right? Mm-hmm. The feeling of being down when you get that rejection, or when you don't get a grant, or when you don't get that promotion, right? What we call very often the soft skills, but I call that power skills. So it's really those two things. It's really both the psychosocial and the career. Now, the mentor, back in the day, everyone thought it has to be someone senior to you, and you would meet every other Tuesday at 4:00 with an agenda. That doesn't work in our reality anymore. Now, the more traditional thinking of mentoring is that you need to have a team, your own personal board of directors, your own team of mentors, where everyone has a different strength. And if you do that, the blinders on one, someone else can help you with it. So you have all these perspectives that you can tap into, all these skills that you can tap into, all these networks that hopefully you can tap into. So you want to get the diversity of perspective, but you also want people at different levels of their career. So you want someone who's senior to you at your career and junior to you. And don't forget retirees.
Oh, yeah. Well, my wife is a mentor and has just retired from Michigan Medical School, and she is still active in mentoring. So well, you touched on something before I let it go. What can a junior person, how can a more junior person mentor a senior person?
So it's very interesting, because there's something to be gained from every person, and everyone has their unique skill set and their unique interests. And whatever it is that person knows, they can teach it to you, right? So I officially learned social media from someone who's a generation younger than me.
That might be, that might not be, they might be too old. No, that's great. Thank you.
Right? That's one of them. The other is, as we get further along in our career and busier and busier and busier, when I would ask this, originally started with the physician scientists, everyone has their go-to journals that they enjoy reading, because there's thousands of journals. You can't read everything. Yeah. So if you're only reading these journals, how are you getting the information from the other journals? So what if I read these 4 and John, you read these 4 and we exchange information? Now that's 8. And what if there's something that you're working on, right? That, let's say you're younger than I am, and you had an idea of how this somehow ties in. Maybe you don't know exactly, but it might be of interest. What if you shared that information with me? Well, I can learn from someone who's younger. You might have the idea, but I have the experience to know how to implement it. That's happened a lot. Also, if you get peers right? People who are at your level, they can empathize with what you're going through.
Absolutely.
The unique
No,
challenges for your level of your career.
now, here's a question that I get asked, and so I want to throw it to you. What's the difference between coaching and mentoring? So
That's a good one. So a mentor is someone who's there long term, and it's that guide by the side, the person who's there to mentor you over your career
mhm.
in many, many different facets of your career. The coach, it's more of a shorter term relationship, and it's usually to work on specific skills, right? So, how can I have an executive presence? How can I overcome imposter syndrome? I'm thinking about switching careers. I'm not sure which way to go. I'm thinking about getting promoted. How do I have this conversation? How do I talk about it? So those are the very specific things that a coach can help
Mhm.
you with, where a
Right.
mentor, it could be over your entire career, right? And
Right.
a mentor will say, I think you've been sitting in this chair long enough. It's time to put your hat in for a promotion.
Right. I often say that they are complementary, but mentors coach. And I think it was some of the issues that one is facing. I can coach you through that process. I am not your executive coach because I'm not in for the long haul.
Yeah,
So that's
exactly.
good. Now, I think of mentors as generous, giving their time and things like that. But what's the other side? What's the protege side? If one is seeking a mentor, what should we be putting into the game? What's our skin in the game? So,
So our mutual good friends, Vineet Chopra and Sanjay Saint, said, if you want to be everyone's favorite mentee, you have to underpromise and overdeliver. Underpromise and overdeliver. So you have to show that you are worth someone's time, effort, focus, and their social capital. Because the second they start taking you under their wing, you become part of their circle. And they can teach you things. They could introduce you to ideas. They can develop relationships and connections for you that you would not be able to get on your own. They can save you a ton of time. You could probably figure out how to do a lot on your own, but they could save you a ton of time. You need to prove over and over and over again that you are worth investing in. And that starts by giving more than you receive. Give more than you receive. Not every conversation should be about what you need. It should also be about what you can offer.
so if let's explore that. So if I'm your protege, you want my time commitment, but what could I do for you? You're the fount of wisdom for me. So what can I give you in return? So,
John, what do you think you're great at? What's your secret sauce?
oh, it's not my golf game. Well, I like, what I pride myself on is being a connector, and helping other people, introducing people to one another. That is a skill that I enjoy.
So there you go. So there's a way that you could probably introduce me to people or ideas I hadn't considered. Because if I am working in the same area, I know the same people who are in my area. But what if you know people from other areas? Now we can break out of our silos and collaborate. And then we can just innovate and be so much more productive. And you can start by making that introduction.
I love that kind of, it's not a one-way street. It's a two-way street. So,
always. And after a while, the best mentoring relationships, they're so fluid that you forget who is the mentor and who is the mentee.
What a wonderful concept. I like that. And we do see that certainly in academic medicine,
Yes.
where someone is a resident or a fellow, and one day they become a chair, and the heir to the chair who perhaps mentored them.
That's right. That's right.
That's
right.
Something else I want to talk about on mentorship, and perhaps it's more specific to women, and I want to make sure I'm using the right terms, and that's sponsorship. And
yes,
I believe Fiona McCauley. She uses she defines sponsorship as when they talk about you outside when you're not in the room in a positive way. Can mentors be sponsors? So,
Yes, and they should be sponsors.
okay.
Anyone can be a sponsor. Even those people who are junior, anyone can be a sponsor. And there's so many ways to be a sponsor. One of the ways to be a sponsor is you recommend someone, you nominate them for awards, prestigious committees, promotions, things like that. But part of being a sponsor is making sure someone's name is connected to an expertise. And we always talk about in business school the golden rule of 7. People need to hear your name around a topic 7 times before it sinks in. Well, you can help with that because you can invite them. Your friend has a podcast, so go invite them to be a guest on that podcast. Take a picture with them. Oh, this is my good friend John. It was so great chatting about X, and post that on Twitter and make sure you tag them, because by doing so, you're throwing your entire network behind it so that they see that you support this person. So if you start to do this over and over again, you will be that person for everyone. And you can be junior to that person, by the way, and still nominate them.
No, that's wonderful. I do like this, and I'm glad how you're really amping up the role of a protege. It's not simply to absorb, but it's giving back too. And thanks to Vineet Chopra and Sanjay Saint for amplifying it and their book on coaching.
Absolutely, and I do want to add, in particular to women, because this is a problem that people are waiting to be sponsored. You can't wait to be sponsored. It's just not going to happen. Mm-hmm. So sometimes you need to gather a group of people who you respect and decide that you are going to nominate each other for opportunities. And if you start to do that, right now, obviously it's people who you think are worth getting the award, the promotion, whatever it is, but you can start doing that for each other, and you don't have to wait for other people, because people are busy, and putting together nomination packets is a ton of work. Right. It's a ton of work. So sometimes you have to seek out opportunities, let people know that you're interested in it. If someone needs to nominate you, offer to write the letter of recommendation, offer to, if other people need to write letters of support. I really think that you should reach out to A, B, and C about this. Let A, B, and C know that you want to be nominated for this. Would they be willing to write you a letter of recommendation? Sometimes you gotta take charge.
No, and I know, and I'm going to say, we men don't really have much trouble doing that, but women hold themselves back. And so, what advice do you have for a woman who is coming into her own career-wise in this very concept? What do you say? So
I'll tell you something that was told to me by Dr. Lynn Wooten, who's the president of Simmons College in Boston. She said to me, people are already talking about you. You might as well control the narrative. Wonderful.
Great. And
I thought that was brilliant.
A colleague of ours, Jennifer McCullum, who is the CEO of Linkage, says similar things. She goes, when we talk about women and, quote, assertiveness or ambition, own it. And this is what you're saying. Ruth, we're coming to the end of our show, sadly, and I always ask every guest for a story about grace. Do you have something that you want to share with us?
So I have a story of when grace happened to me, not because of me. It's the midst of the pandemic, and I lost my dad. My father passed away, and I sort of had to drop everything and get on a plane. And within seconds, the people who I work with said, don't worry about things at work. Just go be with your family. Work will be here when you get back.
Great.
Just knowing that put me at so much ease. That was a type of empathy and grace that we should expect, but we're always afraid to. And when it was said to me, it was just the most calming thing. And all of a sudden, that was just one thing I didn't need to worry about. There was enough other things to worry about. And I am forever grateful for that moment of grace, which continued long after I came back.
No, it's very reassuring, especially for people who are achievement oriented, as you are, and you write about. We carry a lot of things with us, and your colleagues were taking that burden off your shoulder for a moment. And as we're talking about grace, there's a topic that just came to my mind, and that's a man that we both know who acts with grace, and that's Marshall Goldsmith. You are writing about Marshall in his knowledge philanthropy. Do you want to say something about that, Ruth? Oh.
Sure. So our good friend Dr. Marshall Goldsmith is the #1 executive coach in the world. He's coached every major CEO, and he has a very, very loyal following with great reason. And he is now, for the first time, grounded in his life. He's usually living on an airplane. And he found himself in a position where he's thinking about his legacy. And instead of working on his own high achievement, he's thinking about how that can be applied to other people at scale. Mm-hmm. Because one person cannot reach everyone. And as he says, it's not appropriate for him to be the one teaching this to other groups. And then he realized that he could teach what he knows to larger groups who can then have a ripple effect and adapt his content for their unique audiences.
Right.
And he's giving it all away for free, completely for free, his knowledge philanthropy program. He's putting out webinars and he's writing posts. And I mean, it's endless things. And then he has an entire team of volunteers who are organizing it. So as it was said to me, it's like Lego. You take the pieces that you want and you build whatever you want with it. Yeah. So he is really just sharing all of this content, 40 years worth of content for people to use. So there was an article on Tuesday in Forbes, which I wrote, that talked about it. And there will be another one next Tuesday that talks about how certain people actually implemented some of his strategies in their own work.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. I can't think of a more graceful note, except tell us how we can find you, Ruth.
Sure. So I can be found on my website, which is ruthgotian.com. And if you go to ruthgotian.com/mentoring team, you can actually learn how to create your own mentoring team. And then all the social media, it's just my name: LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, Ruth Gotian.
Great. Ruth, you've been, thank you for sharing your time with us. And with that, we are going to exit. So.